Hello, everybody. Welcome to tonight's edition of From the Boardroom to the Locker Room. And we're joined again by Andy Capostagno, who's going to chat to us not only about the British and Irish Lions that gets underway, or that tour that gets underway in a week or so from now, but also the more important weekend's fixture between Leinster and the Bulls and how they've all got there. Andy, welcome to the program. Nice to have you with us again.
Thank you, Louis, and I trust you're fully recovered.
Yeah, we're all good. We're all well and raring to go, as I'm sure Jake White and his Chargers are, just like the Proteas in the crickets. They kind of get to the finals and don't get over the line, or they certainly haven't in a while. Can it change against Leinster, who've never been beaten on this particular ground they're playing on Saturday?
Well, I mean, you say that, but they don't play at Crowe Park very often. Just to put people into the picture, Gaelic football is what's usually played at Crowe Park. And for many, many years, a century in fact, rugby union was persona non grata at Crowe Park. It goes back to the massacre by the British troops in, I think, 1912 that took place at that ground, and they regarded rugby union as part of the establishment. Therefore, they didn't allow it to be played there. That changed about 10 years ago, and the reason that it's at Crowe Park is that the RDS Stadium, which is where Leinster play most of their rugby, is having renovations and is only going to be back online sort of 2026, 27. So they've played most of their season at Aviva Stadium. And I know we're going to come on to talk about the Lions. So the Aviva Stadium is going to be hosting the Lions game against Argentina next week. Crowe Park, the interesting thing, now a lot of people looked at the two sets of fans for the URC semi-finals. There were 15,000 of them for the Leinster semi-final. There were 47,000 for the Bulls game. Now, Crowe Park holds 100,000 people. So if Leinster haven't sold enough tickets, it's going to look a little bit like after the Lord Mayor's show on Saturday.
Yeah, and that, I guess, in a way, will play into the Bulls' hands because they're not necessarily going to have a raucous crowd supporting Leinster, or it certainly might not sound like it.
Well, the other thing, I know that there's a cricket test match being played at Lords at the moment, and a friend of mine was there yesterday, and he said half the crowd was South African, all expats who were there to roar on the Proteas. And I think you'll find there'll be plenty of Bulls supporters at Crowe Park on Saturday. They'll make a noise. They'll make their presence felt. And you're quite right. If Leinster don't have enough people there, it will play to the Bulls. But this is, let's remind ourselves, this is a final between two sides that are quite good at losing finals. The Bulls have done it twice. And Leinster, who have dominated European and URC rugby for the last 5 seasons, when they get into the knockout situation, they tend to lose. It's going to be sort of paper handkerchiefs at 10 paces.
Yeah, looking forward to a big clash between these two sides. Let's just go back, if we can, to the semi-finals and recap for our listeners who and how they got. Obviously, we know the two teams that got there. Bulls had to overcome a poor Sharks, let's be perfectly honest, and in the quarterfinal, an even poorer Shark side to get through via a kickoff. But Leinster have not had the most difficult road to this final and have only been beaten this year when they sent, I guess, a third string side to the Bulls and one game before that.
Well, let's remind ourselves that Leinster are a tremendous team. There are 12 Leinster players going on tour with the British and Irish Lions, which is more than I think the English contingent for the trip. So this is, you say they've had an easier run. Well, you make things easy for yourself by winning rugby matches. And Leinster have done that consistently over the last few years. Everybody's been waiting for their senior players to retire and see whether they continue the success that they've had. But it seems to me as if their transition period is working pretty well. They're a good side. They've got into a position of hosting the final, whereas in previous years they've been knocked out at the semi-final stage. So having got there, having home advantage, being a good side, full of good players. I think if they played this fixture 10 times, the Bulls might win twice.
I guess it comes down to fine margins in finals, particularly with two sides that are relatively evenly matched. And we know with the way South African teams, particularly the Springboks, win matches, quarters, semis and final of the World Cup by a point at a time, Bulls Sharks game, a draw at the end of extra time. This could go down to one kick or one stroke of brilliance, perhaps from a Willie Leroux or somebody like that.
Yeah, absolutely. On the other hand, let's remind ourselves the Bulls are the team who have to travel. And although it's not across time zones as it used to be in Super Rugby, it's still a long haul flight. They're going to be mentally and physically exhausted from winning that semi-final, getting on the plane, going over there and being installed as the underdogs. And I give them the puncher's chance in a boxing contest. We know that they've also got plenty of decent players and that they've got game changers. You mentioned Willie Leroux. So if I were the Leinster Brains Trust, I'd be looking at a way to close down Willie, because he's the playmaker. He's the guy who, although he's nominally the fullback, he tends to spend a lot of time in the fly half channel, and particularly from second and third phase, he's the guy who calls the shots in both the attacking and defensive phases. And I'm sure that Leinster will be working on that. And I was talking about waiting for senior players to sort of run up the white flag. Willie Leroux seems to be getting better and better with age. You know, a lot of people thought that he wouldn't make the last World Cup. Now they're talking about, well, maybe if we put him in cotton wool, he'll make the next one coming.
Yeah.
But it's obviously not just about Willie. They've got a good group of players. They play a form of the game that has become familiar to Bulls fans over the years, which is forward based, and they are not going to get their own way in the set pieces, because this is a Leinster side that's full of Ireland internationals who drive the bus from the front eight. So that's where the clash is going to be. And if the Bulls players aren't quite up to it, then instead of being a close game, it could just turn ugly quite quickly.
And as you mentioned, it's going to be a battle up front, as it always is with South African teams, and a couple of really big players. Think of Jan-Hendrik Wessels, Wilco Louw, Kobus Visser. These kind of guys are going to be right up there in Leinster's face, as will Leinster be. Let's remember there's a couple of connections in South Africa there too.
Yes, absolutely. And two of those players that you mentioned from the Bulls have made the team of the season. And Archie Snyman has been voted the player's player of the season, playing for Leinster. He's one of those guys who just he's different gravy, isn't he? When he walks onto the field, everybody goes, he's not really that big, is he? Yes, he is. But it's not just about the size of the man. It's about how he gets around the park, how he does all of the things that great rugby players do at breakdown time. So I come back to the idea that everything is stacked up against the Bulls, but because they're a good side, and they've got key personnel who know their roles, they've got a chance. But I say again that Leinster should be hot favourites for this game.
What do you read into Jake White's success? I mean, he won a World Cup, but he hasn't been able to get over the line with the Bulls. Is it just bad luck? Is it, I mean, you can't knock the guy. I mean, his record is impeccable.
Yes, it is. And he's been involved with successful teams for a quarter of a century now. I first ran across Jake when he was Nick Mallett's deputy back in 1997. So there we go. That's nearly 30 years ago. And in those days, he was very much a technical guy. And I remember at the turn of the millennium, he was employed by SuperSport to analyze in the studio. And his real-time analysis is what stands out for me, that there are a lot of guys who can look at the videos over and over and over again and then come up with an idea. The guys who can do it as it's happening and work out what they need to change to improve things on the pitch, those people are like rocking horse droppings. And Jake's one of those. You see him on the microphone all of the time because there's always a camera pointed at him. But he's that blend of excellent pre-game analyst and excellent ongoing game analyst. So he's a very. You can't really criticize Jake. It's easy to say, well, he does this and he does that and he upsets people, but at the end of the day, he gets results, and that's why he's very highly regarded. I'm not sure how many years he's got left at the top. Maybe it's time for some new blood at the Bulls, and maybe this game will be pivotal in his career. You know, if the Bulls, against all odds, win, then he'll walk on water and he'll sign a new 3-year contract. However, which is always a possibility, they get humbled, then it might be the end of the road.
We've spoken about Willie Leroux, and there are many great stars in both sides. But again, I have to highlight an All Black. Jordie Barrett, he can play a bit.
Well, all the Barrett boys can play a bit, yeah. And
sure.
He's the key man. I remember they didn't pick him in the starting side a few weeks ago, and people were going, what's going on? And when he came on, you saw the difference that he made to the side. It's interesting times for All Blacks who play abroad, because many of them have got special dispensation from the All Black selectors to be able to not play domestic rugby and still be picked for the All Blacks. And what's happened over the time that South Africa have been in the URC and that Super Rugby came to an end, is that the All Blacks are waking up and smelling the coffee about their system of you can only play for the All Blacks if you play in New Zealand. And I think that this is something that South African rugby went through years ago, and we've come out the other side, and Rassie now picks an enormous squad of players, almost half of whom are playing in Japan, France and Britain. And the All Blacks are going to have to come to terms with that because they can't afford to turn their backs on a guy like Jordie Barrett. He's too good. Lastly,
on this final to Saturday evening, does it benefit the Bulls going in as underdogs, do you think?
Yeah, a little bit. They'll feel that the underdog tag is something that means that they don't have to do quite as many media engagements. The fact that they're not in Pretoria means that they can pretty much walk around unhindered and enjoy Dublin. And Dublin is a city that is there for enjoyment. And I think they'll feel to themselves, and Jake will have instilled it in them. We'll show them. They think that all they have to do is turn up to win the game. We'll show them. And without going over the top, I give them a chance. It's a slender chance because of all the odds that are stacked against them. The travel, the fatigue, the home advantage for the team that they're playing. And number one, the fact that Leinster are a really, really good side. And I still can't look beyond Leinster as winners. If the Bulls win, then hats off to them and humble pie all around. And I will be the first to congratulate Jake.
You're listening to the edition of From the Boardroom to the Locker Room. We'll have more for you after these.
Hey, Unique Tribe, get ready for episode 73, where we tackle a crucial yet often overlooked stage of relationships, the independent stage.
Absolutely. While independence is important for personal growth, it can also become a double-edged sword. In this episode, we will discuss how this stage can transform from empowering to potentially damaging for your relationship.
That's right. It's all too easy to fall into the trap of being so independent that you end up in a state of coexistence, living alongside each other, but not truly connecting.
We will explore how to find that delicate balance between independence and intimacy. We will share insights on recognizing the signs that your relationship might be veering into coexistence and practical tips to foster deeper connection.
This episode is for everyone who wants to maintain a strong, loving partnership while still honoring their individuality. Because at the end of the day, relationships thrive on connection, not just coexistence.
Tune into episode 73 of Unique Yet Connected on the 15th of June 2025. Available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Let's discover how to build relationships that thrive together, not just alongside each other.
Don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and engage with us.
Hi, I'm Louis Karpas. Join me on the next edition of From the Boardroom to the Locker Room as we preview another fantastic sporting weekend. We'll be chatting about the United Rugby Championship final. It's also the US Open Golf Championship and a whole lot more. That's on the next edition of From the Boardroom to the Locker Room. Join me then. A week to go after the final before the British and Irish Lions get underway, and you've already mentioned that there are a number of players in this Leinster side in the British and Irish Lions. Any factor that might play into the way those guys play ahead of what's perhaps sometimes a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity of going forward and playing for the British and Irish Lions as we preview that tour?
Yeah, that's a fascinating point you bring up, because obviously there are a number of Leinster players. There are 12 of them in the squad, as I mentioned earlier. The last thing they want to do is get a serious injury playing in the final. So we've already, they haven't assembled yet, and I think there are 2 or 3 replacements in the system for the Lions already. And one of the things that you know for certain in a game of rugby is if you try and avoid injury, you'll get injured. And so Leinster are going to have to play as if there is no Lions tour coming up. And I would suspect if there are 12 of them on the park against the Bulls, you could expect 1 or 2 of them to not be available for the Lions subsequently. The one thing I think is fairly certain, although the Lions haven't announced this yet, is that there won't be a Leinster player in the team to play Argentina next week at the Aviva Stadium. It's a warm-up game. First time the Lions have ever played in Dublin. And they'll be looking to just get a little bit of a hit out and against really good opposition in Argentina before they fly off to Australia. I mean, ironically, they might get a better game from Argentina than they would from Australia. And ironically, again, looking into the crystal ball for the future, maybe the Lions will think to themselves in 2 decades' time, well, we're not going to tour Australia anymore. They're not good enough. We'll go to Argentina instead. How about that? The Lions playing Tucumán in a good fist fight.
Wow, yeah, that would be something. So there's something very romantic about I also keep saying the Lions, but I need to keep reminding myself to say the British and Irish Lions. I mean, it started off as the Lions. Eventually it became the British and Irish Lions. But there's just a romanticism around it. There's the travelling supporters that go with it. And, of course, the last time they travelled, they played in empty stadiums.
Yeah, that's right, over here. And 3 test matches all in one venue in Cape Town. And it was a forgettable series. The Springboks won it. All well and good, but from a Lions perspective, because they didn't have their travelling support, it doesn't feature. So this is the first time that they've gone to Australia in 12 years, and they're a much better side, I think, this time than they were 12 years ago. The whole squad is fundamentally built around England and Ireland. Some people might argue that there are perhaps too many Englishmen in the side. There are 8 Scots and 2 Welsh. And that, I think, really reflects the balance of power in the home unions. If they could pick some French players, then that would really make it very interesting indeed. But as it is, it's the job of Andy Farrell to find a way to blend the best of Ireland and England and push in the occasional Scotsman to add something indefinable to the mix. And it's something that Lions coaches used to have sort of 4 months to get the team right, whereas these days Lions tours are much briefer, and all of the test matches are crammed in to the last 3 weeks. And I hate that setup. I'd far rather that they went on a proper tour and that they had a test match after, let's say, 3 weeks, and then had 2 weeks off, play another test match, 2 weeks off, play another test match, and then you get to play all of your dirt trackers. You work out what your blends are and who your strongest side is. Whereas the way that it's set up at the moment, they'll play their best side on a Saturday, they'll send the dirt trackers out on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and you'll never really know as a coach whether there are players in your squad who were under the radar, but suddenly you see them operating in a different unit from what you're used to, and you realise, oh, there's a world-class player, I can't leave him out. But you don't get that option with 3 test matches in 3 weeks. It's simply a case of you know who your best squad is on the match day 23, and the only way you're going to fiddle with it is through injury.
Yeah, of the 38 players that are going, 15 are mainly from Leinster and then a couple from Bath and Leicester. Not even in the training camp at the moment. How does that affect them? And as you say, won't even play in that game against Argentina coming up in 8 days' time.
Yeah, the thing that everybody talks about with Lions tours, people who've been on them say that the most difficult part of the tour is getting to know people who you've only really seen as an opponent. And traditionally, that was done over a few pints after a game of rugby that didn't matter that much. And that's all changed fundamentally. So it's a much more difficult task for a Lions coach these days to find the dynamic of a squad. And that's perhaps the only thing in Australia's favour as the Lions go over there, because Australian rugby is at its lowest ebb since probably the emergence of the Ella brothers and David Campese at the beginning of the 1980s. Through the 70s, Australia were a very ordinary side. They always had good players, but they were in general they were an ordinary side. They're now at the stage where they don't really know. They haven't been properly tested. Let me put it that way, at international level, because they're playing a version of Super Rugby where their provinces don't get enough quality opposition, and furthermore, they're in a setup where they're always sucking hind tit, because the best oval ball players will go to Aussie rules and rugby league. And while rugby union was strong in Australia, they managed to hold those two games at bay. But it's no longer the case. And I don't see an easy way out of this for Australia.
A couple of former Lions players must be wondering to themselves how there is a Funda Mava and a Suman in a Lions touring pod.
Yeah, yeah, lovely, isn't it?
It is.
It's a good luck to Duan and Pierre. Both of them remarkable rugby players. I can remember doing Pierre Scumming when he was still at Affys. He came down with the Affys side to Maritzburg College, and I did a game with him there. And whenever I see him, I remind him of that. And he said, yeah, that pack was better than the Bulls at the time. And fair dues, that's the path of your modern day professional rugby player. If you feel that you're not going to be able to play for your national side, then find yourself a job somewhere else where people will look upon you and say, well, this chap's better than anybody else that we've got, let's pick him. And Pierre Scumming's less in your face in statistical terms than Duan van der Merwe, because Duan does the try scoring. Yeah. But Pierre Scumming's a proper player. And van der Merwe will be in a side that has a lot more set-piece dominance than he's used to with Scotland. He might be one of the real stars of this Lions tour.
I guess from what we've spoken about, it might not be a romp, but you can't really see Australia winning the series, can you?
You certainly can't see them winning the series. They might sneak one of the games. It tends to be the case, particularly in the scenario where the Lions might win the first 2 games. They wouldn't have the motivation to turn it into 3-0. Now, Andy Farrell will argue vehemently against that, and he's the sort of guy who can put the fear of God into players. And there have been very, very few instances down the centuries when the Lions have won a series 3-0. And I'm even struggling now, as I'm talking to you, to think of one. There was, of course, 3-1 against, or 3-0 with a draw against South Africa in 1974. But that was a remarkable group of players. This group is not as good as that group 50 years on, but it's good enough for Australia. Let me say that in no uncertain terms. Australia will do everything that they can to unbalance the Lions side. In those early games, they're going to be targeting certain players that they feel are the ones that will make the difference for the Lions. We saw that happen in New Zealand as part of 20 years ago now, when they took out Brian O'Driscoll in an early game because they feared him in the test match scenario. And you'll see that. You'll see some ugly stuff in the opening games. And the Lions are just going to have to cope with that and get over it and play to their potential.
It's amazing. You just said 1974, 50 years ago, and I kind of like had a flashback as to how old I am, because I remember that tour, and I remember there's something about that Mighty Mouse McLaughlin, who played, I think, in 71 and then in New Zealand. And you know, when you hear like Mighty Mouse McLaughlin as a kid who didn't have TV and listened on the radio, I can't believe it's so long ago. My goodness. Andy, it's always lovely chatting to you, and thank you for bringing up some wonderful memories, not only for myself, I'm sure for other people who are old enough to remember the Lions when they came here. And many South Africans, of course, will remember our selection poses during that tour and all sorts of other things. Lions to win, Bulls not underdogs, but I guess the rugby season is only beginning, really, internationally wise. Get over or Saturday, Rob. Then it's on to the international season. I'm sure you're looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. The window, of course, has changed. It used to be June; it's now July, and Rassi has got his people together, working on some plans for those incoming tours. He's in that usually happy position of being world champions. Doesn't matter if they lose every game; they're still world champions.
On that note, we say thanks to Andy Capostagno, and thanks to you for listening to us on From the Boardroom to the Locker Room. As always, be nice to each other until tomorrow evening's program, when we preview another fantastic sporting weekend. Bye for now.